I picked up something special for you. Yeah, this one's a wild ride. From a sitcom that made a sitting U.S. president furious to moments so bold they literally changed what TV was allowed to show. All in the Family didn't just entertain people, it shook the entire country. We're talking about a show where one character's words could spark national debates, where a simple toilet flush made television history, and where, behind the scenes, actors turned down legendary roles, scenes were made up on the spot, and real-life controversies reached all the way to the White House. But here's the crazy part. What you saw on screen was only half the story. Or because hidden behind those loud arguments and living room clashes are casting decisions that almost changed everything. Shocking network battles, and bizarre moments that sound too strange to be true, but actually are. So buckle up, because these aren't your typical trivia bits. Here are 25 weird facts you didn't know about All in the Family, 1971. 25. Lasting TV impact. All in the Family. By the time All in the Family settled into American living rooms, it wasn't just another sitcom, it quietly rewrote the rules of television. Before this show, most sitcoms stayed safe, sticking to light humor and simple family situations. But under the vision of Norman Lear, everything changed. The show dared to bring real-life tension right into prime time, blending comedy with uncomfortable truths in a way audiences had never seen before. What made its impact so lasting wasn't just the topics, it was how naturally they were woven into everyday conversations. Issues like racism, politics, and generational conflict weren't treated like special episodes. They were part of normal life inside the Bunker household. That shift made other creators realize something important. Audiences were ready for more honesty, even if it came with controversy. Writers and producers across the industry began to follow that path. Shows that came after started taking bigger risks, creating characters with flaws instead of perfect personalities. Even decades later, you can still see echoes of All in the Family in modern sitcoms that mix humor with social commentary. The idea that comedy can challenge people, not just entertain them, became part of TV's DNA. In many ways, the show didn't just reflect society, it pushed it forward. And that's why its influence never really faded, long after the final episode aired. Before you move on, hit subscribe and stick around for more deep dives like this. 24. Cultural icon character, Archie Bunker. When people think about All in the Family, one name instantly stands out, Archie Bunker. Played brilliantly by Carol O'Connor, Archie wasn't your typical TV character. He was loud, stubborn, opinionated, and often completely wrong. And yet somehow he became one of the most unforgettable figures in television history. What made Archie such a cultural icon was the balance in his character. On the surface, he represented outdated beliefs and harsh opinions that sparked controversy across the country. But underneath all that, there was a human side. He was a working-class man dealing with change, confusion, and a world that no longer matched his expectations. That mix made him more than just a stereotype. He felt real. Audiences didn't just laugh at Archie, they reacted to him. Some people saw him as a reflection of their own views, while others saw him as someone to challenge. That tension created conversations far beyond the TV screen. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It became a cultural moment. Even today, Archie Bunker is often used as a reference point when discussing complex TV characters. His influence can be seen in many modern roles that blend humor with uncomfortable truth. He proved that a character doesn't have to be likable to be powerful. Sometimes the most flawed characters are the ones people remember the longest. 23. Should network risk gamble? CBS. When All in the Family first landed at CBS, it wasn't seen as a guaranteed success. In fact, it was the opposite. The network knew they were taking a serious risk by airing a show that openly talked about sensitive topics. At the time, television was still playing it safe, and anything too controversial could easily drive viewers away or spark backlash. Despite that, CBS decided to move forward, largely trusting the vision of Norman Lear. It wasn't an easy decision. There were concerns about sponsors, audience reactions, and whether people would even accept a character like Archie Bunker. The show didn't fit the usual formula, and that made it unpredictable. In the early days, ratings were not strong. Some executives worried they had made a mistake, but slowly word of mouth began to spread, and people started tuning in, not just for laughs, but to see what the show would tackle next. That curiosity turned into massive viewership over time. Looking back, CBS's decision feels bold and even visionary. By taking that chance, they didn't just launch a hit show, they helped reshape television itself. It proved that audiences were ready for something different, even if it made them uncomfortable. And once that door was opened, there was no going back. 22. Bold social topics. One of the biggest reasons All in the Family stood out was its fearless approach to real-world issues. Under the guidance of Norman Lear, the show didn't shy away from topics that most programs avoided completely. Instead of staying in a safe fictional bubble, it stepped right into the middle of ongoing social debates. Episodes tackled subjects like racism, gender roles, politics, and even topics that were rarely mentioned on television at the time. But what made it unique was how these issues were presented. They weren't delivered as lectures. They came through arguments, jokes, and everyday conversations between characters. That made the message feel natural and relatable. The show trusted its audience to think for themselves. It didn't try to give easy answers or clean resolutions. Sometimes episodes ended without fully solving the conflict, just like in real life. That honesty made the storytelling more powerful and memorable. For many viewers, this was their first time seeing such topics discussed openly on TV. It sparked conversations in homes across the country. Families would watch together and then continue the debate long after the episode ended. This bold approach changed expectations. It showed that sitcoms could be more than simple entertainment. They could reflect society, challenge opinions, and still make people laugh along the way. 21. Live audience energy. A big part of what made All in the Family feel so alive was its use of a real studio audience. Unlike many shows that relied heavily on artificial laugh tracks, this sitcom captured genuine reactions from people watching the scenes unfold in real time. That energy added a layer of authenticity that viewers at home could instantly feel. When something funny happened, the laughter wasn't forced. It was real. And sometimes those reactions went beyond simple laughter. There were moments when the audience gasped, went quiet, or reacted strongly to a bold line delivered by Carol O'Connor. Those natural responses made each episode feel unpredictable and dynamic. The presence of a live audience also influenced the actors. Performers like Gene Stapleton and Rob Reiner could adjust their timing based on the crowd's reaction. If a joke landed well, they might pause slightly to let the laughter settle. If a serious moment hit hard, they leaned into that silence. It created a rhythm that felt almost like a stage performance. This approach helped blur the line between theater and television. It gave the show a unique pacing and realism that set it apart from others at the time. Even years later, that live audience energy remains one of the key elements that made the show so engaging and memorable. 20. Script arguments. Behind the scenes of All in the Family, things weren't always smooth. In fact, one of the biggest sources of tension came from Carroll O'Connor himself. While he brought Archie Bunker to life in a way no one else could, he was also deeply involved in how the character was written, and that often led to strong disagreements with writers and producers. O'Connor wasn't the kind of actor who simply read lines and moved on. He cared about the meaning behind every scene. If something felt off or unrealistic to him, he spoke up. Sometimes that meant long discussions, and other times it turned into heated arguments over scripts. He wanted Archie to be more than just a one-dimensional character, and he pushed hard to make sure that depth stayed intact. These clashes could slow down production, but they also improved the show in many ways. By challenging the writing, O'Connor helped shape a character that felt complex and believable. He didn't want Archie to come across as purely hateful or ridiculous. Instead, he aimed to show the human side beneath all the flaws. Even though the arguments were intense at times, they came from a shared goal, making the show as strong and impactful as possible. In the end, that creative tension played a big role in turning All in the Family into something truly special. 19. Archie's role. Rejection before Archie Bunker became one of television's most iconic characters. The role almost went in a completely different direction. Mickey Rooney was actually one of the first choices to play Archie. On paper, it might have seemed like a perfect fit. Rooney was already a well-known name, and his presence could have given the show an instant boost. But things didn't go as expected. Rooney turned the role down, and his reasoning was pretty strong. He believed the show was too controversial and risky. According to reports, he even warned Norman Lear that the project could fail badly because of its bold content. At the time, that concern made sense. Television had never really seen anything like this before. That decision ended up changing everything. With Rooney out, the role eventually went to Carroll O'Connor, and that casting choice turned out to be perfect. O'Connor brought a unique mix of humor, stubbornness, and vulnerability that made Archie unforgettable. Looking back, it's hard to imagine anyone else in that role. What seemed like a risky rejection at the time actually helped create one of the most legendary performances in TV history. Sometimes, the roles actors walk away from become just as important as the ones they accept. 18. Edith's real personality. On screen, Edith Bunker came across as soft-spoken, gentle, and almost childlike in her innocence. But in real life, Jean Stapleton was nothing like that at all. The difference between the actress and the character was actually quite surprising to many fans. Stapleton was highly intelligent, confident, and deeply thoughtful about her work. She approached acting with a strong sense of purpose and professionalism. Playing Edith required her to step into a completely different mindset, one that involved slowing down her speech, adjusting her tone, and embracing a kind of vulnerability that didn't reflect her true personality. What made her performance so impressive was how natural it felt. Viewers often assumed she was similar to Edith in real life because the portrayal was so convincing. But that was simply a testament to her skill as an actress. She carefully built the character from the ground up, adding small details that made Edith feel real and relatable. Despite Edith's gentle nature, the character often served as the emotional center of the show. And that balance came directly from Stapleton's understanding of human behavior. She knew exactly when to bring warmth, when to show strength, and when to let silence speak louder than words. Her ability to transform so completely is one of the reasons her performance is still remembered and respected today. 17. Gloria casting. Wynn landing the role of Gloria Stevick was no small achievement. Sally Struthers had to compete against many other actresses, all hoping to secure a spot on what was still an uncertain project at the time. The show hadn't proven itself yet, and there was no guarantee it would succeed. Struthers brought something unique to the audition. She had a natural energy and emotional range that made Gloria feel real from the start. The character needed to balance humor with strong opinions, especially when standing up to her father, Archie. That dynamic was central to the show, and it required an actress who could handle both light and intense moments with ease. Once she was cast, it quickly became clear that the choice was the right one. Her chemistry with Rob Reiner and Carol O'Connor helped bring the family dynamic to life. Gloria wasn't just a supporting character. She played a key role in the generational conflicts that defined the show. Over time, Struthers' performance earned recognition and praise. She grew along with the character, taking on more complex storylines and emotional scenes. What started as a competitive casting process turned into a defining role in her career and an important part of what made All in the Family so memorable. 16. Young star breakout. When All in the Family began, Rob Reiner was one of the youngest members of the main cast, but his role as Mike "Meathead" Stivic quickly became one of the most important parts of the show. At first glance, Mike seemed like the typical young, outspoken character, but his presence added something much deeper to the story. He represented a new generation, one that challenged old beliefs and wasn't afraid to speak up. Reiner's performance brought energy and realism to that role. His arguments with Carol O'Connor, he who played Archie, became the heart of many episodes. These clashes weren't just for laughs. They reflected real conversations happening in homes across the country. The generational divide between Mike and Archie gave the show a powerful dynamic that kept viewers engaged. As the show gained popularity, Reiner's performance didn't go unnoticed. He received critical acclaim and went on to win Emmy Awards for his work. That recognition helped establish him as a serious talent in the industry. What started as a risky project turned into a major career breakthrough for him. Over time, Mike Stevic became more than just a character. He became a symbol of changing times. And Reiner's ability to bring both humor and conviction to the role is a big reason why that character still resonates with audiences today. 15. Screen time dispute. As All in the Family grew in popularity, creative control became more important than ever. Norman Lear was deeply committed to telling complete, meaningful stories, and that sometimes put him at odds with the network. One of the biggest issues came when CBS decided to cut a few minutes from episodes to make room for more advertisements. For most producers, this might have been a standard decision, but Lear saw it differently. Those few minutes mattered. The show often dealt with complex topics, and removing even small parts could weaken the emotional impact of a scene. Lear believed that every moment was there for a reason, and cutting content would compromise the storytelling. In an unusual move, Lear even offered to cover the financial difference himself just to keep the episodes intact. And it was a bold gesture that showed how strongly he felt about the integrity of the show. However, the network refused, and the cuts went ahead anyway. This situation forced the writers to adapt. They had to tighten scripts and deliver the same impact in less time. While challenging, it pushed the team to become even more precise in their storytelling. The dispute highlighted an ongoing struggle in television between creative vision and commercial demands, something that still exists today. 14. Museum-worthy props. It's not every day that a piece of sitcom furniture ends up in a museum, but that's exactly what happened with Archie Bunker's famous chair. Over time, this simple prop became one of the most recognizable symbols of All in the Family. It wasn't just a chair, it represented the character, his personality, and the entire world of the show. The chair originally came from a modest background, reportedly bought for a very small price. But as the show grew in popularity, its meaning changed. It became tied to countless memorable scenes, especially moments where Archie would sit and deliver his strong opinions. That connection turned it into something much more valuable than its original cost. Eventually, the chair and its matching partner were donated to the Smithsonian Institution. Being placed there alongside important historical artifacts showed just how much cultural impact the show had. It wasn't just entertainment anymore, it had become part of American history. Visitors to the museum often recognized the chair instantly, even years after the show ended. It serves as a reminder of how powerful television can be. A simple object, once used as a prop, turned into a lasting symbol of a groundbreaking series and the conversations it sparked. 13. Multiple failed pilots. Justice for All before. All in the Family became a massive success. It went through a long and uncertain development process. One of the most surprising parts of that journey was the number of failed pilots created before the final version came together. The earliest version, titled Justice for All, looked quite different from what audiences eventually saw. The show was also reworked under another title, Those Were the Days, as creators tried to find the right tone and cast. These early attempts struggled to gain approval, and networks were unsure about moving forward. At the time, the concept felt risky, and executives weren't convinced it would connect with viewers. Even casting went through major changes. Different actors were brought in, and some didn't quite fit the roles. It took time to find the perfect combination that could bring the story to life in the right way. These repeated setbacks might have ended the project entirely, but Norman Lear continued to push forward. Eventually, the show found a home with CBS, and the final cast came together. That version became the one audiences loved. Looking back, those failed pilots weren't wasted efforts. They were necessary steps that helped shape the show into what it ultimately became. 12. Theme song confusion. Right from the opening seconds, All in the Family did something unusual. Instead of a flashy intro, it showed Archie and Edith sitting at a piano, singing a simple, old-fashioned tune. The song, Those Were the Days, quickly became iconic. But surprisingly, it also confused a lot of viewers, especially because of one specific lyric. The line about a LaSalle car left many people scratching their heads. Some didn't recognize the reference, while others misheard it completely. Since television audiences at the time were very vocal, complaints started reaching CBS. Viewers wanted clarity, and the confusion became big enough that it couldn't be ignored. As a result, the network made the unusual decision to have the song re-recorded. The goal was simple: make the lyrics clearer so audiences could understand them better. It might seem like a small change, but it showed how closely the show was being watched and how much attention even the smallest details received. This moment also highlights something interesting about the show's impact. Oh, people weren't just watching casually. They were listening, analyzing, and reacting. Even the theme song became part of the larger conversation surrounding the series. That level of engagement helped turn All in the Family into more than just a show. It became something audiences felt connected to in a very real way. 11. Major film rejection. At the height of All in the Family's success, Jean Stapleton was presented with a major opportunity outside the show. She was offered a role in the now famous film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. For many actors, this would have been an easy decision, a chance to step into a big movie and reach an even wider audience. But Stapleton chose a different path. Instead of taking the film role, she decided to stay committed to the sitcom. That decision says a lot about her priorities as an actress. She believed in the importance of her work on All in the Family and understood the impact the show was having. Walking away, even temporarily, didn't feel right to her. Her dedication paid off. She continued to deliver powerful performances as Edith Bunker, earning critical acclaim and multiple Emmy Awards. The character remained a central part of the show's emotional core, and Stapleton's presence helped maintain its balance between humor and sincerity. Looking back, it's interesting to imagine what might have happened if she had chosen differently. But in the end, her decision strengthened the show even further. It ensured consistency in one of its most important roles and allowed her to fully develop a character that remains unforgettable to this day. 10. Their real-life inspiration. One of the most fascinating aspects of All in the Family is how deeply personal it was for its creator, Norman Lear. The character of Archie Bunker wasn't just imagined out of nowhere. He was heavily inspired by Lear's own father, making the show feel grounded in real-life experiences rather than pure fiction. Lear grew up hearing many of the same kinds of opinions and attitudes that Archie expressed on screen. Those memories stayed with him, and when it came time to create the show, he drew directly from them. Even some of Archie's catchphrases were influenced by things Lear had heard in his own home. That authenticity gave the character a level of realism that audiences could recognize instantly. What made this connection even more powerful was the emotional complexity behind it. Lear didn't simply portray his father in a negative light. Instead, he captured both the flaws and the humanity. Archie could be frustrating and offensive, but he could also be vulnerable and even caring in unexpected moments. This balance is what made the character so compelling. Viewers didn't just see a stereotype, they saw a real person shaped by his environment. By pulling from his own life, Lear created something that felt honest, and that honesty became one of the show's greatest strengths. 9. Sally Struthers' legal fight. At one point during the show's run, things weren't going smoothly for Sally Struthers, who played Gloria. Despite being part of a hit series, she became unhappy with how her character was being used. Her role felt limited, and she wanted more creative opportunities and stronger storylines. Frustrated with the situation, Struthers made a bold move. She tried to leave the show. But it wasn't as simple as walking away. Contracts in television can be very strict, and hers was no exception. She ended up spending a significant amount of money, reportedly around $40,000, in an attempt to break free from her agreement. The situation turned into a legal battle, and in the end, she lost. That meant she had to remain on the show despite her frustrations. While it was a difficult period, things eventually improved. Over time, her character was given more depth and stronger material, allowing her to showcase her talent more fully. In a way, the struggle led to growth. Gloria became a more developed and important part of the story, and Struthers' performance continued to evolve. What started as a challenging conflict behind the scenes ended up contributing to the show's overall strength and character development. 8. First toilet sound on TV. At a time when television followed strict and often unspoken rules, All in the Family did something surprisingly simple but completely groundbreaking. It featured the sound of a toilet flushing on screen. Today, that might seem like nothing, but back then, it was considered inappropriate for television. Shows avoided anything that felt too real or too close to everyday life inside a home. Under the creative direction of Norman Lear, the show pushed past those limits. Including a bathroom sound wasn't just about humor. It was about realism. The goal was to make the Bunker household feel like a real place where ordinary things happened. And in real life, people used the bathroom. It was that simple. When the episode aired, it caught viewers off guard. Some were surprised, others laughed, and a few were even uncomfortable. But that reaction was exactly what made the moment important. It showed that television didn't have to pretend that everyday life didn't exist. Small details like this helped break down the barrier between fiction and reality. After that, other shows slowly started to follow. What was once considered shocking became normal over time. This tiny moment ended up having a big impact, proving that even the smallest changes can help reshape an entire industry. 7. Expensive prop chairs. Archie Bunker's chair might look like an ordinary piece of furniture, but behind the scenes, it became one of the most valuable props in television history. Originally, the chair was bought for a very small amount, reportedly around $10 from a thrift store. No one expected it to become such an important symbol of the show. As All in the Family grew in popularity, that chair became closely tied to Archie himself, played by Carroll O'Connor. Many of his most memorable moments happened while sitting in it, delivering his opinions with confidence and attitude. Over time, the chair became almost as recognizable as the character. Eventually, the original chairs were donated to the Smithsonian Institution, turning them into cultural artifacts. But the show wasn't over yet, and production still needed identical chairs for filming. That's where things got expensive. Creating perfect replicas that matched the originals in every detail ended up costing around $15,000. It's a surprising jump from $10 to thousands, but it shows how much meaning the object had gained. What started as a simple prop turned into something priceless. It became a symbol of the show's identity, proving that even the smallest items can carry a huge legacy when they're part of something special. 6. Improvised debate scene. One of the most memorable and oddly funny moments in All in the Family came from a simple argument, whether you should put on both socks first or one sock and one shoe at a time. It sounds like a small, almost silly debate, but the way it played out made it unforgettable. What many viewers don't realize is that this scene wasn't fully scripted. The exchange between Rob Reiner and Carroll O'Connor was inspired by a real-life conversation. The actors leaned into that natural disagreement, on allowing the moment to feel genuine rather than forced. That authenticity is what made the scene stand out. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like something that could happen in any household. As the argument continued, it built into something much bigger than the topic itself. Like many scenes in the show, it reflected the larger dynamic between the characters. Mike represented a more logical, modern perspective, while Archie stuck firmly to his own way of doing things. Even a simple routine became a symbol of their differences. The audience loved it. The humor came from its honesty, not exaggeration. Moments like this showed how the show could turn everyday situations into something meaningful and entertaining at the same time. 5. Iconic kiss scene, Sammy Davis Jr. One of the most talked about moments in All in the Family history came during a guest appearance by Sammy Davis Jr. The scene itself was already exciting, as Davis was a major star, but what happened at the end turned it into something unforgettable. In a surprising twist, he kissed Archie Bunker, played by Carroll O'Connor, on the cheek. The reaction from the live audience was immediate and huge. Laughter went on longer than usual, making it one of the longest laughs in the show's history. It wasn't just funny, it was unexpected, bold, and perfectly timed. The moment stood out because it flipped expectations in a way that felt both playful and meaningful. What makes this even more interesting is that the moment had a spontaneous feel to it. O'Connor leaned into the situation, allowing the surprise to land naturally. And that authenticity made the scene even more powerful. It wasn't overdone or forced, it just happened, and that's what made it memorable. Beyond the humor, the scene also carried a deeper layer. At a time when the show often explored issues of race and identity, this brief moment said a lot without needing a long speech. It showed how comedy could break the tension and create something people would remember for years. 4. President Backlash, Richard Nixon. At the height of All in the Family's popularity, the show wasn't just being watched by everyday viewers. It had reached the highest levels of power. Even Richard Nixon, the sitting president at the time, had seen it. But his reaction was far from positive. One particular episode, which included a storyline involving a gay character, reportedly triggered strong disapproval from Nixon. Secret White House recordings later revealed his frustration and anger toward the show's content. He believed the topics being discussed were inappropriate for television and went as far as suggesting that the show should be taken off the air. This moment highlights just how bold the series really was. It wasn't just pushing boundaries for entertainment, it was challenging social norms in a way that even political leaders found uncomfortable. At a time when such topics were rarely discussed openly, All in the Family brought them directly into American homes. 3. NFL player, casting experiment, Chip Oliver. Before the final cast of All in the Family came together, the creators experimented with some unusual choices. One of the most surprising was casting Chip Oliver, a professional football player, in the role that would eventually become Mike Meathead Stevick. At the time, Oliver had no acting experience. The decision reflected how uncertain and experimental the early stages of the show really were. Producers were still trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, and they weren't afraid to take risks, even if those risks seemed unconventional. Oliver appeared in one of the early pilot versions, but the result didn't quite hit the mark. Acting for television requires a different skill set than sports, and it became clear that the role needed someone who could handle complex dialogue and emotional exchanges. As a result, the show went through another round of changes, and the part was eventually recast. 2. A Harrison Ford rejected role. Before becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Harrison Ford had the chance to be part of All in the Family. He was considered for the role of Mike Meathead Stevick, a character who would later become central to the show's dynamic. But in a surprising move, Ford turned the opportunity down. His decision wasn't based on scheduling or money. It was about the content. Ford reportedly felt uncomfortable with the show's approach and worried that it might normalize the kind of bigoted views expressed by Archie Bunker. At the time, that concern made sense. The show was doing something completely new, and not everyone was sure how audiences would interpret it. The role eventually went to Rob Reiner, who brought a very different energy to the character. Reiner's performance helped define the show's central conflict, especially in his debates with Carol O'Connor. That chemistry became one of the key reasons for the show's success. Looking back, Ford's decision feels like one of those what-if moments in entertainment history. While he went on to achieve massive success in film, the role he passed on became a defining part of a groundbreaking television series. 1. Mickey Rooney predicted failure. At the very beginning of All in the Family, before it became a cultural phenomenon, there was a moment that almost changed everything. Mickey Rooney, a major star at the time, was offered the role of Archie Bunker. It seemed like a big opportunity, but Rooney saw it very differently. After reviewing the concept, he reportedly warned Norman Lear that the show was too controversial and risky. And according to accounts, he even suggested that it could damage careers and fail. From his perspective, the bold themes and sharp dialogue were simply too dangerous for television audiences. Because of those concerns, Rooney turned the role down. That decision opened the door for Carol O'Connor to step in. What happened next completely changed television history. O'Connor's portrayal of Archie became iconic, turning the character into one of the most memorable figures ever seen on screen. In hindsight, Rooney's prediction couldn't have been more off. Instead of failing, the show became one of the most successful and influential sitcoms of its time. But that early rejection remains a fascinating reminder of how uncertain the project once seemed and how close it came to taking a very different path. Not from shocking presidential reactions to improvised moments that became TV history. This wasn't just a sitcom, it was a full-blown cultural revolution hiding behind a living room couch. Now I've got to ask you, which fact surprised you the most? Was it the one that rarely happened, or the one that changed television forever? Drop your answer in the comments. I read way more of them than you think. And hey, if you enjoy discovering the crazy stories behind your favorite shows, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button like Archie protecting his chair. No one touches it.